As you are probably aware, all over the world, every week, individuals who understand themselves as being in the Judeo-Christian tradition or among the Abrahamic faith, they pay what are known as tithes and offerings. And so the tithe is considered the tenth. A question, however, is, are the individuals actually authorized to pay these tithes? And who exactly is authorized to receive the tithes and offerings? And so the discussion here is, will a man rob God? And this comes from scripture. We're going to elucidate this, and then we're going to address this question. For a number of reasons, this question is primarily directed towards those who understand themselves as descendants of Jacob or understand themselves as Hebrews, even more so than those who understand themselves as Christian. There's a reason for this. And so the question is, who can actually receive tithes and what are tithes? Now we're going to do this discussion in either one or two parts, depending on the response to part one. And so if the discussion in part one is adequate, we will go on to part two. If the discussion in part one is not adequate, we will leave it there and give everyone time to research it for themselves. So in Malachi 3:7, it indicates, even from the days of your fathers, ye are gone away from mine ordinances, and have not kept them. Return unto me, and I will return unto you, saith the Lord of hosts. But ye said, wherein shall we return? And of course, this conversation is with respect to the descendants of Jacob, and so those tribes. Malachi 3:8 goes on to state, will a man rob God? This is a rhetorical question, by the way. Yet ye have robbed me, but ye say, wherein have we robbed thee? In tithes and offerings. Malachi 3:9 goes on to indicate, ye are cursed with a curse, for ye have robbed me, even this whole nation. So we're going to clarify a few things here before we go on with the discussion and with your research. The first thing to think about is that there are no Levites. And so you'll hear people talk about Levites today. However, there is no clear indication that individuals who trace their ancestry to the Levites actually exist today. And so Levites are those biological descendants of the entity known as Levi. And so everyone can't be a Levite. You actually have to be descended from that actual father line. And so right now, there is no clear indication of anyone descending from that specific line. Now, you will have individuals who will assert that the country of Haiti is the country of the Levites. However, there is no proof for this assertion either. And so there are special considerations for the Levites, and that's why this is important to point out. And if you have been studying and you have been entertaining this question about who is actually authorized to receive tithes, are you supposed to be tithing? If you've been entertaining these questions, then you have also been perhaps entertaining the questions about the Levites. Another thing to keep in mind is that there is no land of Jacob at this point in time. There is no kingdom belonging to Jacob. There is not a single temple, and there is not a single tent that is dedicated by the Creator in Scripture. And so these are some things to keep in mind at this point while you are pursuing the answer to this question. Historically, there are a number of pastors or preachers that have become economically very well off based upon the receipt of what is known as the tithe. There are some particular personalities that stand out historically. You have Reverend Ike, you have Sweet Daddy Grace, and also Father Divine. So why is this rhetorical question in Malachi related to, will a man rob God? and then specifying that it's related to tithes and offerings. There's a reason for this, of course, and if you've been reading the scripture and studying this and looking into this issue, you know that there has been an allocation of the tithe. There has been a practice of tithing that is inconsistent with what the scripture indicates. And so you will find answers related to the tithe in Leviticus and Deuteronomy. And so that's for you to do some research on. We will come back to it based upon the research that people do. And so according to scripture, when you look at scripture, there are certain entities that are authorized to receive the tithe. It is not Judah. It's not clergy in general. It's not Reuben or Asher, all of the children of Israel. No, it is specifically the descendants of Levi, so the Levites. And so that's a particular class of people, and they are authorized because of an inheritance issue. And so it's your task to look into what this inheritance issue is all about and why the tithe is reserved to the Levites. Why are the Levites the ones who are handling the tithe? Another interesting notation with respect to the receipt of tithe is that others authorized to receive the tithe are the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. And so some people might be surprised to find this out, but the tithe in part is supposed to meet the needs of those who are poor, those who are without, those who are considered migrants or strangers, those who do not have parents, and women who are widowed. It's your task to research the scripture to find out why this is the case and where this is indicated. And then going on from that, what is your response supposed to be with respect to this? This is not a New Testament dynamic. This is coming out of the Old Testament. And so you need to be clear about that line of demarcation with respect to the Old and the New Testament and which audiences are being addressed with respect to the tithe and the offering. It's pretty much impossible to be addressing tithing, Old Testament tithing in the New Testament because of the very purpose of tithing in the Old Testament. Additionally, there is an important question about the nature of the tithe. What exactly are tithes? If you look at scripture, tithes are specifically laid out. It's very clear what constitutes a tithe. However, in current times, many people are led to believe that a tithe is 10% of one's income in the form of currency, in the form of money. However, that is not consistent with scripture. And so you are encouraged to look at scripture and see what scripture actually says about the nature of the tithe. Now, of course, some people will say that you have to update this to current times. However, the scripture doesn't say anything about updating to current times. It has a specific indication for tithing, and undoubtedly there's a specific reason for it. And so again, you are encouraged to do the research to better understand the nature of the tithe so that you can better answer these questions in the discussion. And again, based upon the discussion, that will determine where we go from here with this discussion. So if there's a part two, it will be based upon what is coming out of the actual discussion. And so if I am the only one discussing, then we won't be going to part two. We will be staying right here with part one, and you will be given plenty of time to do more research. Now, it has already been established in the book of Malachi that the individuals understood as Jacob were not tithing appropriately. And there are all sorts of admonitions related to the process of the tithing. And so that question about will a man rob God is multifaceted, because what is going on in the scripture in the Old Testament is the placing certain people in the position of God. And so they are receiving, so to speak, on behalf of God. And so they are standing in the shoes of God. And so those would be poor individuals, children without parents, widows, and those who are called strangers, so migrants, and also the Levites, because they don't have the same type of inheritance as the other people, and they are the ones who are charged with being responsible for the entire religious organization of that particular collective. And so, this whole question about will a man rob God is a very important one as people entertain this question surrounding tithing and who is authorized to receive the tithe and who are you authorized to provide the tithe to.